What's going on, gunfighters? Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting with God at the center and real-world, first-hand experience. Today we're going to be talking about collectible guns that are still useful in today's world for gunfighting. Before I get into the bio, don't forget to scroll down and hit some stars, especially if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes. Scroll down, hit some stars. It's an easy way to support the podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you get new episodes. And then I don't mention it often, but we have merchandise if you want to check out our merchandise at goodshepherdtraining.com. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector, pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. All right, after all that, are you ready for the day's topic? Let's start talking about collectible guns that are still good for gunfighting. If you listen to the recent episode where I talk to a good friend, John, a professional gunfighter like myself. And often other times I have said, this is not gun collector life. This is gunfighter life. But I also mentioned in that podcast, I have nothing against gun collecting. I just don't do it. I'm not a gun collector. I live, a nomadic lifestyle. I live off-grid quite a bit. I'm blessed to have some really nice guns, but they are for a purpose. They serve a purpose. And in general, if I have a gun that I don't shoot, it doesn't shoot really well, or I don't have a purpose for, I'll generally get rid of it. Because I'm not a gun collector. But I know a lot of people out there listening are gun collectors, and there's nothing wrong with that. Especially in today's market where inflation is what it is, I'll just put it that way. And it's a real thing. And guns are oftentimes a really good investment, whereas keeping your money just laying around may not be a good investment because it'll be worth less in a year, 6 months, whatever. So what are some guns that you can collect that are still good for gunfighting today? Martini Henry's a really cool rifle, but I don't think it has a role in today's real gunfighting arsenal, especially for the money. You could get something else that's a lot more practical for less money. So what are some good gunfighting guns for today that are still highly collectible? I think, and I can't see the future, who knows what will happen, but I believe the value of these guns will only go up. And they're still relevant, they're still good for gunfighting. I'll start out with a gun that I get a lot of flack for, calling probably the best combat handgun ever fielded. And I believe that's the Beretta 92 and its family. I know a lot of people will take exception to that. They'll say it's whatever their favorite gun is, but as somebody who's used one and carried one quite a bit, it's not my go-to gun anymore. I didn't say best concealed carry gun. I didn't say best, USPSA gun. I'm saying best war-fighting combat handgun. I don't think there's anything else that's better that's been generally issued. And since a lot of people don't want those right now, a lot of people don't see the value in those right now. Everybody wants a new plastic fantastic. They're really undervalued. I've seen some really, really good values on trade-ins for the Beretta 92, and the Beretta 92 FS is a fantastic, fully capable, smooth shooting, ridiculously accurate and reliable handgun. Just look at the results it turned out in the handgun trials, and it's only been improved since then. The locking block and things like that have only been improved, but it will go thousands of rounds without a failure. It is ridiculously reliable, and it, in my opinion, except for some crazy custom thing like a Wilson Combat, it is the most accurate production handgun, I think, of any. At least in the combat style of handgun, not including like Target 22s or things like that. And they're a really good value right now, and they're not super coveted. I think they're undervalued, so I think that collecting them right now is probably the best time to collect them, because I think they'll only be worth more and more money. As people start looking back with nostalgia on, Die Hard and Lethal Weapon, and it was kind of the go-to revolutionary high-capacity handgun of the 90s, the late 80s, early 90s. And I think that as one generation goes and another one comes to age where they're collecting, it'll only go up in value. So those Berettas, the 92 FSs, the M9s, any of those in that style, and some of the more off the beaten path ones that are really cool, the Enox, the stainless. And that's going to be a good transition to our next one. And this is the Gen 1 Glocks, the Gen 1, Gen 2 Glocks. You still can find these sometimes, and people don't really know what a treasure they are because they want the newer version of the Glocks, the newer version of the Glocks. You got the whatever new model every couple of months coming out. But the old Gen 1 and Gen 2 Glock 17s and 19s, I think there'll be a time when they are worth a lot more than they are today. And it's still a Glock. It's still good for gunfighting. It's still without, all the bells and whistles, like the slide cut serrations and the stippling, which I'm not saying are not improvements, but if you look at the basic function of it, the Gen 1 and Gen 2 Glocks will do fine. They are a good combat handgun. They are a good concealed carry handgun. They are sleek and light and utilitarian. I'm not a big Glock fan. I do have a Glock 26. It's one of my go-to CCWs. I've been carrying a Glock 26 as a CCW for a long time. It's not my go-to. It's what I carry if I can't carry something bigger and better. But it is still in my lineup for that reason. And I do have a Glock 17. And I have that because a lot of my students, a lot of people that I train with or shoot with, that's the number one thing that they'll carry or shoot, whether they're law enforcement or civilians or whatever, is a Glock. So I just have a factory option Glock that I'll take out and shoot, so they don't say, oh, it's your fancy gun. I'll just shoot a Glock. A lot of times going to a training class. So I still have two for that reason. They're not my favorite gun, I'll be honest, but I think the Gen 1s and Gen 2s are really going to start becoming collectible. And they're still quite capable, so they're very fitting with today's episode. The next one I'm going to talk about is kind of like the Glock, so it's an easy transition in that you either like them or you don't like them. You either think they're good looking and attractive or they're just not that. And that's the old Smith & Wessons. I really like these. Your old Smith & Wesson, like model 59s, 5906s, are real classic, police handguns of the day. Any of those. And I think the Smith & Wesson 59 and 5906 are quintessential, but there's a lot in that kind of family, that same style of gun. Your 39s, your 459s, your 659s, all of these guns are kind of in that all-metal, kind of that transition time from when we, in America, still really valued the classic, all-metal guns with wood grips or maybe polymer grips, but a metal-on-metal gun with a hammer, in that kind of guise. But we're getting into the higher capacity world. We're getting into the 9mm as being a common American round instead of some weird German thing that Americans kind of use sometimes. It's kind of becoming a staple round. So you'll also see a lot of these in 40 Smith & Wesson, as this was a time when law enforcement thought that was a good round. But I think they're beautiful. And some people would disagree and say that a Glock is beautiful and they're ugly. I mean, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But I think they're gorgeous looking guns. A lot of them come in stainless, which I really like. If you listen to the podcast, you'll know I like that. And they're still a capable combat fighting handgun. Semi-automatic in common calibers, reliable. They have good sights from what I remember. They're a good solid handgun. They were used for a long time by law enforcement. They are good solid handguns. And again, there's a bunch of different variants of them. But just start looking up the Smith & Wesson 59. I believe they even made 10 millimeters. That would be a really cool gun. I don't think I've ever handled one of those in person, but I do believe they exist. They'd be a really cool gun. But any of those are just cool guns. And I think they're highly collectible. I think they're not really prized as highly as they should be right now. And they're still a relevant combat gun. I would not be afraid to carry one of those as a CCW if that's what I had. I think they're still plenty capable for today. Now, my next one is for the guys that really like the classic military old wood stock guns. And this will be the only one like that, I think, on the list. As far as you think of like your classic bolt action battle rifles. And I think bolt actions are a little obsolescent. They would be fine for arming. Let's say you had a militia and you had like an auxiliary force. You had like a compound or a retreat or wherever, and you wanted to hand these out to second line troops. They would be great, this rifle I'm about to talk about, because they still take a common caliber. And they are a good gun. The original gun was not in this caliber, but it's known for being a fast handling, really fast and accurate, and just good combat rifle. And that's going to be the Enfield. The Enfields that America used. We think of like the 1903 Springfield, but we fielded, from what I understand, a lot more Enfields as Americans in World War I than we did 1903s. They're a great combat rifle. The British were known for shooting them so fast people thought they had semi-autos even though they were bolt actions. The way they're designed, the cock on close kind of mechanism, it's very fast for a bolt action. And you might think I'm going to say get one of the ones that we have, whatever the pattern was that we chambered in 30-06 as a common round, but I'm not going to go that route. I think that those are highly prized, especially the unmodified ones if you're talking about a collector ones. If you're collecting, you don't want the sporterized ones. If you're collecting, you want the original guys, and those are quite expensive, and I think we've already missed the point where those were a good investment. That point would have been around, the 50s, 60s maybe. But there are some that are in a common caliber that are still quite capable and quite good rifles. And they're the Ishapurs, I believe made for India. And they are the same design and all that as the original Enfields, but they're in 308. And I don't have to tell anybody that 308 is a good round. It's a good common round. In fact, during this last crunch, the ammo shortage, it was one of the very few rounds you could reliably go in and find and get, even when a lot of other rounds were hard to get. That was probably one of the easiest rounds to get, is the 308. And the Ishapurs are chambered in 308, 7.62, NATO. It's a common round. And those, since a lot of people aren't really into Indian firearms, those Ishapurs, last time I checked, were not crazy expensive. They were a decent price. And like I said, they wouldn't be my first choice. Like if I'm running into the apocalypse, I don't want an Ishapur in 308. But if I had, let's say, a garrison or a compound I was protecting and I was handing them out to second-line troops, just auxiliary troops, a 308 fast bolt-action rifle with good, combat sights on it, you could do a lot worse. So I think that's as far back as I'm going to go and still call them something that might be relevant today for gunfighters, for preppers, for people in that kind of mindset. They're obviously a robust design. They handled the trenches of World War I. A very nasty, austere environments. And you can get versions in 308 that aren't crazy expensive. So I'm going to put that on the list. Transitioning from that, the combat rifles that kind of took their place, more modern. The AKs, the AK-47s. And I'm going to tell you that I am not an AK expert. As much as I know about guns, there are guys who know that much or more on just AKs. There are tons of countries that have fielded the AK. There's a tons of different makes and models and variations and parts kits, builds, and all manner of things. There's Gucci ones that come in now that are like custom made from really good companies that are really, really good rifles. And I'm not going to give you an exact recommendation because, like I say in the beginning, this comes from real world first-hand experience. I don't know a ton about collectible AKs because I'm not a gun collector. But I will tell you that there are several out there that are crap, that are not good investments, that you shouldn't buy unless you just want a beater gun to train with and have an actual decent AK to trust your life to, and you just want to shoot crap ammo through a dirt cheap AK. But if we're talking about an investment, there are several good ones. There are countries that made them and have a reputation for making them far better than others. I would say if you're looking for a collectible, get one that was made for a military and search around and do your own research and find ones that are undervalued that are still good, military grade. Perhaps you want one with a milled receiver over a stamped receiver or something like that. Get one that's collectible, that's a good quality, and if you do that, it will still be a quite capable gunfighting gun. It's still one of the most, if not the most common battlefield weapon, small arm, around the world. It's still used to great effect today. We just got our butts whooped by a bunch of Afghanis, mostly armed with AKs. Now they have M16, M4 variants. I won't get into that, but they schooled what you would argue is the greatest military force, the U.S., with AKs. So you can't say they're not still relevant. So find one, if you want to be a gun collector and a gunfighter, find one that's both. Find one that's highly collectible. And again, I'm not going to give you exact recommendations, but if you find one that's a good quality and highly collectible and you want to collect it, it'll still be a quite capable gunfighting rifle. Maybe buy one of those and then buy an old, or not even an old, a newer parts kit, put together beater AK, train with it, run with it. And then if stuff gets really bad, get your pristine, really nice, really well-made AK. Because if things get that bad, you're not going to care about gun collecting. Probably. Which is a good transition to the next one we're going to talk about, which is even more modern. There are a ton of ARs on the market. There are so many and so many Frankenstein builds and so many M4 clones and M16 clones, and there seems to be a new manufacturer of those popping up every week. Almost none of them collectible, but there are some that I think are collectible, and those are the Colts. The Colt 6920s, or any of those derivatives, but they're kind of colloquially known as the 6920s. The ones made to the law enforcement specifications, the military specifications, the Colt 6920s, known for having, reliability and good quality components. Those, I think, are collectible. Who knows when Colt's going to go bankrupt again, or going to switch manufacturers, or do this or do that. And you can even look, even in the 6920 world, just that one model, there are some that are far more collectible than others. But I say if you're getting an AR and you want it for collecting, I think the Colts are really the best game in town. There'll be a time when, there already is a time right now when ARs are a dime a dozen. They're just everywhere and everybody's pumping out decent ones for good money. And there's a lot of, if you're talking about a gunfighting gun, there's probably better ones out there for the money. But if you're talking about collecting that you may have to press into service as a gunfighter, I can think of no better recommendation than the Colt 6920s. Or any of the slightly older Colts. The Colt, M16A2 copies, M16A4 copies, any of those. FN to some degree if you're talking about the military style clones. But really, I think that that's where it's at. I really think that the Colt 6920s or the M16 kind of clones made with the same quality of components, I think that's really a good place to go if you're looking for a good gunfighting rifle that's collectible. And you can do the same thing here where you get your budget one, or you build your Frankenstein dirt cheap AR and you run it and it has a few malfunctions and you don't care because it's for training. And your Colt 6920, your collectible gun, you keep in good condition, and it's collectible, and it's a good gunfighting rifle. And then transitioning away from that, a good transition point would be the Colt 1911s. Now, you'll know if you listen that I like 1911s. I don't apologize for that. Some people don't. Some people say they're outdated. I say they're not. I'd say a lot of people shoot a 1911 better than a lot of these polymer striker-fired handguns. Even if they've only ever shot polymer striker-fired handguns, you'd be in like a professional training class and you'd hand them a 1911 and they would shoot it better. And I would rather have somebody get good hits with their first, second, third round. I think for most people in most situations, that's far more relevant than whether they have a 14th or 15th or 16th round. Because most gunfights are solved in the first couple of rounds. Or at least they should be solved in the first couple of rounds. If you have a, let's say, police officer or whomever that mag dumps a 15-round mag and the adversary is still up, they don't have a capacity problem. They have a marksmanship problem. So I say the 1911 is still very relevant. Now, you'll know I'm a big fan of the STIs, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. I am going to talk about the Colt 1911s. Colt at this time still is making 1911s. I think they are reasonably priced. I don't think they're cheap, but I think they're reasonably priced. And they make all manner of them. They still, I believe, make the Colt, whatever they call the Combat Elites, all those, that line. They are fantastic, gunfighting handguns. They are beautiful. They are great to shoot. If you have been running a plastic Fantastic for some amount of time, and you think that gun is holding you back either in speed or accuracy, and you want to step up your gunfighting game, I really think you should not necessarily go this route, but at least consider a good quality 1911, whether a 9mm or 45. I think you should really look at that and actually go and shoot one and see if it doesn't improve your marksmanship. You can get to the point where you can outshoot a Glock, especially in accuracy. And if you get to that point, a lot of times a 1911 is a beautiful choice. And again, the Colts, as far as collectability goes, lots of people make 1911s. Lots of people probably make, honestly, a better value 1911 if you're just going to beat the crap out of it and not worry about resale. But if you're a collector and you care about that kind of thing, I think your crossover 1911 that's still made really well, a lot of them, like the combat elites and things like that, still have all the factory upgraded parts that you're going to want on a gunfighting handgun. You probably don't want a original GI 1911. I'd say those are right on the border of being obsolete. But with a modern sighting system, with the scallop cutout around the barrel to help with ejection and some of those problems, with a lot of the modern features, full-length guide rods, things like that, undercut trigger guard, forward slide serrations, all those things that make it a good modern fighting handgun and still highly collectible. So I'd say look at that if that at all intrigues you. Look at what Colt is producing now or has produced in the last 10, 20 years. Those aren't going to be crazy expensive like an original World War I 1911 is, but I think they're still going to go up in value. The next one I'm going to talk about, I was a little reluctant because there was a time when you could pick these up for under $100 and then, $125 and then $150, $179, things like that. And now they're far more than that, but I still think they're a good value. The quality and the ruggedness and the practicality of these, I still think are a good value. I think they're only going to continue to go up because most of the surplus has dried up. The SKS. The SKS is a fantastic rifle. When I was growing up, it was kind of the poor man's broke redneck deer hunting rifle. And they're great for that. They are a great mid-sized game hunting rifle. Much better than the AK, just the way the sights are and the way the gun is configured. It points, it handles like a sporting rifle. But it has that good intermediate round. If you get a good ammo selection, I don't recommend Full Metal Jacket, but if you get good, soft point 7.62 39 ammo, it is a great intermediate cartridge. And the SKS is a well-handling, with good sights, weapon. Now, a lot of people get these and try and turn them into AKs and try and turn them into something that they're not. They put all kinds of crazy stocks and, detachable magazines and stuff on them. I don't think you should do that. I think you should leave them the way that they are and enjoy them for what they are. They're a fantastic, capable battlefield and even hunting implement. If you get good reloading 10-round stripper clips, that's a decent rate of fire. That's a good rate of fire with an intermediate cartridge, and it's reliable. They were designed to work that way. You're not, doing some kind of side hack where you're getting it to take mags it wasn't meant for, detachable mags it wasn't meant for, or all kinds of other crazy stuff and ruining the value by throwing some plastic stock on it. I'm all about good modern guns. I'm a gunfighter. I want the best tool for the job. But if you're going to talk about an SKS, I say if you want an AK, get an AK. If you want an SKS, leave it the way that it is. It's a beautiful, beautiful weapon. It kind of was for a long time the de facto kind of prepper, especially like budget, poorer, and there's nothing wrong with being poor, poorer prepper gun. There was a time, like I said, you could pick these up for $100 and some all day long. They're more than that now, but I still think they're undervalued, and I still think they're going to go up in value. I still think they're worth mentioning. I still think for the quality that you get, if you get one that's in good shape, that somebody didn't shoot a bunch of crap corrosive ammo and leave it lying around to corrode, if you get one in good, pristine shape, a lot of people bought these when they were dirt cheap and set them in a safe and didn't shoot them, now they go to sell them. That's the kind that you want. If you take care of it, you can shoot it a lot. And if you get one in good condition, I still think they're undervalued. So I'd say give a good hard look to the SKS. Look for the best value. And again, I'm not a gun collector, so I don't know which ones are best and which ones are known for inherently being better than others or highly collectible. I don't honestly know that. But I know that they are a good, practical, reliable, semi-automatic rifle in an intermediate cartridge. They are built very ruggedly. Imagine if you take care of them, they will last a long, long time. Another big advantage to this SKS is, and I often forget about this because I avoid these places as much as I can, but let's say you live somewhere where your rights are being restricted, where your right that shall not be infringed is being infringed. If you live in one of those places, it doesn't matter that the AR-15 is more modern and you can do detachable 30-round magazines. If you can't legally own detachable 30-round magazines, that kind of negates that for you at that time. I don't know of anywhere where a non-detachable 10-round magazine is an internal magazine is illegal. There might be some ridiculous place like that, but I don't know of any. So it's legal, and you're better off well-trained and equipped with a good SKS and being competent with it and going out to the range and going shooting competitions with it than dreaming about the AR-15, the new Daniel Defense AR that's probably great that just came out that you can't own. The one that you can have in your truck because it's not illegal versus even maybe something that you have squirreled away, pre-banned stuff that you can't have on you and can't use. Again, this is gunfighter life. So I think for a gun that you can collect and still use, especially in a restrictive place like that, the SKS is still worth considering. The next one is right along those lines. It's not a detachable box magazine. It's not super high capacity, but it is an awesome battlefield implement. America's version of this, our battlefield implement, the M1 Garand. The M1 Garand is a fantastic and was at the time revolutionary firearm. It has a great amount of firepower. It might only have 8 rounds, but 8 rounds of 30-06 that can reliably and repeatedly be put on target at distances from anywhere out to 1,000 meters, 800 meters. If you have the marksmanship skill with good ammo, that's still a formidable fighting weapon. I don't think we should reissue those to our soldiers instead of, M4s or M5s or whatever. But I'm saying, especially if you live in one of these states where you can't have ARs, AKs, SCARs, things like that. If you live in one of those places where you can't legally have and or train with or carry them in your car, again, it's much better to have and train with and shoot an M1 Garand and have that in the back of your truck. Or if you're getting into gun collecting like we're talking about today, have that good pristine matching serial number from the best manufacturer in pristine condition put away. And then a lot of times at gun shows, you can find these Frankenstein ones where back when they weren't real valuable, somebody drilled into the side of the receiver to mount an optic or an old scope for hunting because that's what they had. And it kind of destroys the value, but you don't care because it's your training M1 Garand or the one you put in the back of your truck M1 Garand. Live somewhere where you can't have a more modern gun, or just because you like them and they're cool and you train and you shoot service rifle matches and you're really good with an M1 Garand. That's fine. I'd rather have the guy that's really good with an M1 Garand than the guy that bought the Daniel Defense AR and never zeroed it and has it because it's cool. You can a lot of times find these where guys piece them and parted them together where they're not all matching. They don't have all matching manufacturers or the original barrel or things like that. And again, it kind of destroys the collector value. But if you get a good shooter, train with that one, keep your good collectible one in good condition and beat the crap out of the one and don't abuse it, but use it. That's a good option. So the M1 Garand is a good collectible and I still think capable gunfighting rifle. The next one I'm going to talk about is a gun so good, it wasn't originally meant for military service, but it was so good that the military used it and still does use it. And that's the Remington 700. The Remington 700 has been made in more different guises and different configurations than I can recall. Much more than I know about. There are some beautiful, anything from a titanium mountain rifle to a giant bull-barreled behemoth bench rest rifle in all manner of calibers. But I think if you're talking about one for collecting, look at ones that are old, back when Remington still made good stuff, and it saddens me to say that, but I was excited when Remington started making stuff again, and I bought one of their guns, and I thought, surely if they're just coming back online, they will have put the effort into this and made this a good gun. And it wasn't, and I'd hate to say that, because it hurts me to say that. I really wanted them to do good, but the gun I bought from them sucked. It didn't work, and it was one of their flagship guns. And I had to put a bunch of my own time in it after I put good money into it to actually get it to function. So with that being said, the Remington 700 was made for a long time, and I think right up until, and I could be wrong about this, again, I'm not a gun collector, but I think right up until the 90s, up and through the 90s, they were good guns. And a lot of times you can find these Remington 700s in all kinds of configurations. Whichever one you want, take your pick. If you're talking about a good crossover for a practical, and I'm talking about practical in this role, not a battlefield rifle per se, but more of a designated marksman rifle. I mean, the snipers still use the Remington 700. It's a fantastic gun. And you can get these that aren't super expensive a lot of times. You can get a lot of really good bolt-action rifles that are cheap, that are probably more accurate, to be honest, and faster. Let's say a Ruger American or a Savage Axis. They're ridiculously accurate. They're less money. But we're talking here a gun to use and train with that's also collectible. I love Savage Axes. I don't see them as highly collectible. But I think the Remington 700s are, and I think there is so many out there. You know, people might start coveting and liking the ones made in the 50s and the 60s, but I think right now you can still find good deals on them that are made in the 80s and the 90s, and they're still good quality guns. And again, if you want this as a crossover, get it in a caliber that you can find and shoot. You know, don't get it in a .222 Remington. That's a cool caliber, but probably not what you want if you want a crossover for shooting and collecting. Get one in a .308. That's the quintessential caliber. If you want one a little bit better, even than the military one, as far as long range goes, the .260 Remington, which if you don't know is very akin to and even a little bit more powerful, I believe, than the 6.5 Creedmoor. It was the 6.5 before 6.5s were cool. It's an awesome caliber. They were made in this caliber. That would be a fantastic choice if you wanted to get into more of the long range or designated marksman type role in your squad and your militia, and if that's how you gravitate. That's not how I gravitate, I'll be honest. I've done quite a bit of precision rifle, really accurate rifle shooting, but I enjoy the art of shooting more than the science of shooting. But if you like the long range precision kind of shooting and you want that crossover, I think the 700 and a .260 Remington or a .308 is kind of the way to go. A lot of these older ones still came with iron sights, and I really like iron sights. I think iron sights belong on a good survival rifle, so if you wanted the tactical aspect is not your thing, but more of the hunting aspect and maybe defense is your thing, maybe find one with a good set of old iron sights. The good thing about a 700 is they're super popular. There's a ton of different mounts on there. You can get like a rail on top and a quick detach, low power variable optic. And you could run that as a quasi-scout. Now, I know the scout purists are going to be like, it's not a scout, because you got to have a forward-mounted optic or whatnot. But the heart of it is there. With the low-power variable optic, you can shoot quickly with both eyes open. You can run the bolt quickly. You could put a scout rifle sling on it. You could have those good, I really like the Remington old iron sights on their hunting rifles. They are beautiful. I wish they still put them. I wish they were still a standard. Sadly, they're not. But that would be a good all-around scout-ish. Can we call it a scout-ish without people getting mad? A scout-ish style. I don't know, maybe we'll call it a bush rifle. But I think those style of Remington 700s made in the 80s and 90s. You want something even lighter and handier? The Remington Model 7s. I don't believe they make those anymore. They are like a baby 700, all the things that are great about the 700 except lighter and handier. So if you want mostly a hiking mountain rifle, let's say you live in Wyoming and you want more of that kind of guys, you may want a long range defensive rifle in the back of your truck along with your assault rifle or whatever that's still collectible. Those are fantastic. And I think at some point those Model 7s are really, really going to be prized a lot more than they are right now, valued a lot more than they are right now. Along with the Remington 600s, they are pretty rare. They're kind of funky looking. I think they're really cool. A lot of people don't really like them, but if you see one of those for a good deal, I wouldn't hesitate to grab that up. And a good transition from there, we're talking about Remington, so bam, going to talk about Remington again. The Remington 870, not any of them, but the 870 Polices and the Wingmasters, the ones made, again, 90s and before. They are really, really good guns. I think a lot of people really do value them, but I think there were so many made and they were so popular for so long that you can still get them for good money. The quality of a 90s and before 870 Wingmaster is just, they're a work of art. They're just freaking gorgeous. I think they're great. I don't think they're like Colt, as in far as like the new Colt 1911s are still really good quality. I don't think, sadly, that the quality of the new Remingtons can even compare. I don't even think they should be called the same model. I don't think 870 should even be on them compared to the old 870 Wingmasters and Police. Now, the Police ones are great. In fact, a lot of the early Police ones are Wingmasters. And then they came out with their own special Police models. The Police models and the Wingmasters generally have some better parts and better components. So you're not just paying for decoration or for fine bluing, although they are beautiful. You are getting a little bit better components, a little bit more robust components. And again, there were a lot made, so a lot of times you can get them for good money. And I think they're not making guns of that quality anymore. At least I don't think the Remington 870s are. So there'll be a time, I think, when those really go up in value a lot more than they are now. And they're still practical. They would still be a great truck gun. You know that I think that a good shotgun with a reasonable rate of fire, which this meets those criteria, is my go-to kind of apocalypse gun for feeding myself, putting food on the table, for defense. I don't care if it's wilderness. I don't care if it's an urban environment. That's the one long gun, unless there's some other situation, that I'm going to grab. And these do that, and they're highly collectible. And they are smooth cycling. They are beautiful. They are fantastic guns. Again, you could get one of these really good if you find a really pristine Wingmaster. Take it out and go pheasant hunting with it on really beautiful days, and then wipe it down with an oilcloth when you get home, and then find an 870 Wingmaster that's been beat up and duck hunted with, and the bluing's worn off, and you see people's handprint on the receiver because that's how they carried it. You take that thing and you Cerakote it, and you maybe send it to Van Comp and get a compensated combat style barrel on it, and run the crap out of that one. And I'm big on continuity of training. You run that one, and then you have your really, really nice one that, again, you can take out and take hunting with, and if things get really bad, you can press it into service. It's still a good gunfighting gun, but they are highly prized and beautiful and collectible. And the last one I'm going to talk about, I think, is every bit as good a gun as far as components and quality and fit and finish as the Remingtons. They just never saw a wide-scale adoption by police and military, so they're not nearly as many, and they're not nearly as common. So they're a little bit harder to use as a gunfighting tool today because they don't make as many accessories for them. Like if you bought that old beat-up, really, really used hard 870 Wingmaster for training, you could put a brand new Magpul stock on it. The ones I'm going to talk about, you're probably not finding those kind of accessories. But if you want just a utilitarian, working man's, beautifully made, from a time when Americans made high-quality, beautiful stuff in America, the Winchester 1200s and 1300s. I know a lot of you think in the Winchester Model 12, but I do prefer I think there's a more modern design and still beautiful. They kind of straddle that line as far as still being a beautiful American-made classic and modern and practical. The 1200s and the 1300s. Some of the wood on those is gorgeous. The fit and finish on some of those have like jeweled bolts and things. I'm not a gun collector. This is one of the guns I had. I believe maybe the first gun I ever bought with my own money. That wasn't like I had an uncle give me an old bolt action 410, and then after that I saved up and bought, I believe, a Winchester 12 or 1300, and I sold it. And that's one of the guns that I really wish that I had kept. They are just smooth. Every time I see one, And again, I try not to be a hoarder of stuff. Every time I see one, though, when I work the action on it, it's just one of the smoothest, most high-quality shotguns I've ever felt. So if you're looking for a gun to collect, and that would be a great collectible gun and good for gunfighting, those Winchester 1200s, 1300s, and they're really not coveted. You can find those a lot of times for a couple of $100, and I think the quality in that is a couple of $1,000. Again, I'm not a gun collector. I am, selling stuff on eBay to try and fund getting this podcast growing. But if I was looking at buying a gun right now, that would be high on the list at a gun show or something like that. I think there'll be a time when people look back at those and want stuff from a time when Americans made really good high quality stuff here in America, and see those, and just, you can look at them and see the quality. If you're any kind of craftsman or enjoy quality guns, you look at that, pick one up, and you're like, there's quality here. There's craftsmanship here. And I think people will come to see that. Well, I think that's the last gun we're going to talk about today. We're running long already on this episode of Gunfighter Life. I think that guns are a good place to park money. I have bought guns for the purpose of using, but I knew they were going to be a good investment when I bought them, and they have really, really gone up in value. And I am trying right now to sell a few guns to, again, fund this podcast. If you don't know, I stepped down from a full-time general manager position because I didn't think I could do a good job at that and do a good job as good as I could do at these podcasts. So if you appreciate that, consider becoming a patron. If you're going to buy any of these guns for the fraction of, not a gun, for the fraction of the cost of a box of ammo, you could become a patron and support this podcast. If you appreciate this content, if you learned anything at all today, please consider that. You heard about my service in the bio. If you want to thank me for my service and you sincerely like the podcast, a free way, just scroll down and hit some stars. On Spotify, on iTunes, just scroll down, hit some stars. If you want more, you want to see some cool pictures of me hunting as a professional hunter, or some gunfighting pictures, shooting drills, check out goodshepherdtraining.com. There'll be a link to those things in the show notes. With that, man, I want to say thanks for listening. And as a thanks for staying tuned all this time, listening to me ramble on about different guns. I'm truly humbled that you guys listen. I really am. As a thank you, I throw out a tactical tip. The tactical tip for this is going to be not on what to do, but on what not to do. The thing not to do, if you get a gun like this, especially like an old World War II gun, an older military gun, let's say one of those Ishapur 308s, if it's got some rust on it or something like that, or some imperfection or dent in the wood or something like that, don't mess with it. Don't try and strip it all down and make it look pristine. People that want those guns, they know they're 70 or whatever years old. They know what they're supposed to look like. Unless you have one that's pristine, like you have that, that unicorn M1 Garand that was made right at the end of World War II and then mothballed and then sold and then is in just perfect condition. And collectors are going to know that. Don't buy the old beat up M1 Garand and try and make it like that. You're going to hurt the value almost certainly more than you're going to help it. If you're looking at getting into collectible guns, it's got a little bit of rust on it, wipe some ballistol on it. If it's got a couple of dents in the stock, leave it that way. You're almost certainly going to do more harm than good if you try and restore it. If you're like a professional restorer, like that's what you do, you color case harden and stuff for a living, then you know what you're doing. But if you don't, if you're an amateur, you're almost certainly going to hurt the value more than help it if you're talking about a collectible firearm. Like I said, if you want to buy an old beat-up 870 Wingmaster that's been used for duck hunting a ton and Cerakote it, that's fine. But that's not your collectible one. Your collectible one is that one you buy in pristine condition. And if it has a few little flakes where the bluing's not right, leave it alone. I learned that the hard way. If it's for collecting, don't go buy some of that cold blue and strip it down and re-blue it. It's almost certainly going to get worse than just leaving it alone. The next tactical tip is going to be something you can do for determining a decent value on a lot of guns. Not a lot of people go to Gunbroker and they look up a gun and they're like, oh, this person wants $3,000 for it. It must be worth $3,000. Wrong. If you have an account, you go to Gunbroker and you go to completed listings. You want to look at completed listings for as far back as it will let you and look at what the guns actually sold for. Not what people ask for them. I could I could list a high point on Gunbroker and ask $1,500 for it. That doesn't matter. It matters what people are buying it for. So look at the completed listings and then the sold listings. It doesn't matter if somebody wanted something for it and it didn't sell. It matters what people are willing to pay for it. You're trying to determine actual value, not like a dream value, like, oh, I think this gun should be worth $5,000. Well, that's fine. But it's not unless somebody's actually willing to pay that for it. So again, Gunbroker, make sure you have an actual account, not just browsing on there. And then go to a little tab, should say advanced or more options, and then completed listings, and then sold listings to see what people actually paid. If you're trying to sell a Chinese SKS, not what somebody wanted for their Chinese SKS, look at what they actually sold for, and that'll give you a realistic, grounded in reality value of your gun. And that's going to bring us to, more important than the tactical tip, the practical tip of the day, the verse of the day. Of the day, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. As I mentioned, I'm not a gun collector, but I am blessed with many nice guns. I've been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life. I have guns that some people would really dream about having, and I'm blessed to have those. All that I have is a gift from God. More so than the guns, the talents that God's given me to be a state rifle pistol champion. The confidence God's given me to step up to the line and do, man-on-man steel competitions, or to step up to a door and kick it open with somebody trying to kill me on the other side. Those are all talents and blessings from God. They're given so that you can bear fruit. You remember the parable of the talents? Where the talent is taken from the one who is not using it and give it to the one that has more talents. You're given these things to bear fruit with them. Use them. God is all wise and all knowing. What sense does it make to keep giving talents to somebody that's wasting them and not using them? Use the talents you've been given. To he who has, more shall be given. That's what it says in that parable. To he who has, more shall be given. And he who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. You've been given these. Go bear fruit with them. Go use the talents you've been given. Whatever arena that is for you, whether that's business or gunfighting, marksmanship, competition, use the talents you've been given and bear fruit. With that, men, have a blessed day.